Welcome to the Machines and Molecules podcast. Machines and Molecules hosts guests that have backgrounds in chemistry, biochemistry, and machine learning. And our guest today is Richard Socher, who has been doing his PhD a long time ago at Stanford University, where he then also became an adjunct professor, but decided instead to go and build a startup. Sold it to Salesforce, was the chief of research at Salesforce for quite some time, and has been building his own startup after that. Welcome, Richard.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here and chat with you.
How are you today?
Pretty good. Exciting times in the world of AI and chat and search assistants and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So today I decided to talk to you more about startup building, investing, rather than AI. Maybe to start off, can you say whether you see that certain startups in AI, what connects startups in AI that tend to take off after some point?
So I think there's some things that are special about AI in startups, and there's some things that are the same as they are for every startup. And sort of a line I recently heard again and stuck with me from Jeff Bezos, which is everyone is thinking about what's changing all the time. And he thought maybe we should think more about what's going to be the same in 20 years from now. People want cheap prices, people want fast deliveries, in his case of Amazon. And I think what's not changing for startups is you need to have strong go-to-market motions. You know, if you're in B2B, you need to have good sales teams and marketing, you know, before that, pre-sales. So those things haven't changed, and those things are common among many B2B startups in AI that are successful. I think in general, we see a lot more B2B startups in AI also be successful. I think it's a general trend. SaaS is very hip. I think it's much harder to build consumer companies. And we would generally discourage most people from it. I'm breaking my own rules. I'm fully aware of you.com, but we see it's usually easier to monetize on the B2B side. So that is another commonality. We see very often strong teams, you know, and we see often look at risks. So founder risk is the first one you often look at, especially at pre-seed early stages. And the founders just have to be incredibly smart, but they also have to have a lot of grit and not giving up. But running a startup is extremely stressful, and it's a lot, and you need to learn ways to deal with that stress and keep your health up and running, especially as you get older. I feel like sort of magic age of 27, and then things go downhill and you can't do certain things you used to be able to do and get away with them. And so yeah, there are a lot more things that are common. You know, founding teams are strong. If you can get a team that works well together, it's usually great. And in particular for AI, something that helps long-term is if you're building a data moat and you have what I would call a virtuous AI cycle, where you sell a product, and while selling it and while users are using a product you're able to get into market, you're also collecting training data to make that product better and better with AI. So for example, if you only sell a full self-driving car, it's really tough, right? You can't make any money for a long time. If you first built a solid electric car or a solid like general car that people are buying, and then you have contracts such that you can collect all the training data that they're now producing and you connect all the cars to the cloud, then all of a sudden you're making money while you're also building a data moat and have this virtuous cycle going on. So that's the big difference. You know, Tesla having all their cars kind of connected to the cloud, and that's very, very powerful. And we see that in some cases for AI, but it is also why in some cases big companies have a huge advantage over startups, because they do have a product and market, and now they have to just add AI to it, and it's easier often than starting from scratch. Now there are some industries where AI changes the entirety of the landscape, and then that rule breaks also. But I'll pause there.
Mm. Yeah, when you say B2B startups in AI, I think one of the challenges I see personally is that you have to have both competencies and big time. Like you have to know a lot about the industry that you're working with, and you have to be really good in AI. And just due to due to how society functions, like people in AI know people in AI, people in whatever biochemistry know people in biochemistry. So that's quite a difficult thing. And have you seen, like, can you say something about that? Have you seen patterns evolving there, especially in B2B?
The pattern is often that smart people get attracted by other smart people, and you want to really set a seed with your company of just as brilliant of a person as you can find, and it often makes sense to wait a little bit longer. In the beginning of a startup, especially if you just got funding, you want to just pedal to the metal, like move fast and do cool stuff. But then it is often better to wait a little bit longer for that really amazing talent, especially for your first 5 people. Because when you hire like solid people are not amazing, and then you later on say, oh, well, now we have more money and so on, you try to attract better and better people, it gets harder and harder because they will interview, and then in some cases they're like, oh, this is just not as exciting of a team that I want to join, and they don't feel challenged enough. So I guess that is one aspect. But then, if you're really, really smart and you're in physics or chemistry, but you just have a lot of intellectual sort of horsepower, I feel like the AI community has been very good at making its findings, its technology, its capabilities easier and easier to access. If you compare this like to chemistry or biology, like no one can just go and buy like a very cheap sequencer and just have some fun changing a sequence, right? Like that is like a massive complexity and so on to like make a DNA sequence modification in your own, like at home, right? But the AI community pushed really hard, and it's really thanks to some of the most famous people in AI who've been pushing that, and the conferences and so on, like Jan LeCun, Jeff Hinton, Yoshua Bengio, and then like others have also open sourced a lot for a long time, and that's unfortunately kind of a trend that is maybe not continuing as strongly, though Hugging Face is doing its best to keep that alive too, to have that open source mindset. And that open source mindset essentially enables now more and more people to do something with AI, right? If you just understand the basics and you can program a little bit, you can do some incredible things thanks to open source. And so in that sense, I feel like the bar to apply your domain knowledge and use AI in some way to enhance that has gotten lower, and that's I think phenomenal. And I hope more scientific fields kind of have that abstraction layer mindset, where you don't have to code in assembly languages, you don't have to like code in C++. And soon, maybe, you can code even less and less in even Python and more in human language, right? And so there's just a lot of momentum towards these abstraction layers. Whereas, like, I'm trying to still learn about biology sort of for fun on the side. And man, I feel like I have to build those abstraction layers myself. I don't find like as many good materials and ways to just say, okay, let me like really do something exciting in this field. You just have to spend a lot of time learning, which is also fun.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe it has to do a lot with the possibility of digitalization, right? I mean, in AI, it started in a very digital field. Everything we do in AI is very digital. So this is something that biology and chemistry cannot do. Like some things you just have to do in the lab. So that might be one of the reasons, right?
That is 100% correct. And but I think there's only a few folks in the field that are actively working on building those abstraction layers. Like you could also argue setting up a server is really complicated, right? If you have to buy the CPU, you have to put it yourself, like put it together yourself and so on. It gets pretty complicated, but that's fully abstracted with PC. And then the full server thing and connecting to the cloud, that's fully abstracted with cloud, right? And then to like then set up a web server, that's fully abstracted also. And in that mindset of enabling the standing on the shoulders of giants through these abstraction layers is something that I feel like you could also do. You could have a cloud computer that does physical things for you ultimately. Like at some point, bits are being moved on a physical chip too, right? And like there's just not enough drive into automating the physical things, but there's also now in Silicon Valley a lot of sort of accelerationists in the most positive interpretation of that vibe that are working actively on like chem computers, right? Say I want these molecules, and like it is like a robot that will then try to put chemical reaction together for you, and the same with bio and like getting specific proteins generated. And I think that will be a huge unlock for the fields of chemistry and biology once you connect them to robotics, which is potentially even somewhat deterministic. But then once you enable those robots to really have AI capabilities, that's when those fields can have just that explosion and speed that we're seeing in computer science.
Yeah, definitely. There's quite some startups that work on it, but there's still a lot to be done. And even just, making it possible to handle all of these different types of reactions in a similar way, that seems to be quite a hassle at the moment for these startups. So do you see AI playing a certain role in the future of various industries, like a certain pattern of, let's say, for example, we do things faster, or we can automate things, that is the same in various industries? And if you see one or many such patterns, how does that influence your decision to invest into a company with AIX?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think we see a lot of speed in just software, like software as a service, SaaS, enterprise. Like the way we work will be vastly different in the next few years. And basically, you could think of every boring and somewhat repetitive task that you're doing, and depending on how future-leaning and digitized your industry is, that task will get automated, and you will focus only on the ones where you like had to think for a little bit and be creative, or interact with a human in some capacity, or connect different disparate streams of ideas and so on. But the more repetitive the task is, the more that task will get automated. And so you see that in service automation, that will be a big one, and taxation, like putting together tax reports, in sales, like outreach and keeping people engaged in the funnel, in marketing, like building very specific marketing messages for specific cohorts of people in a more automated way, in revenue cycle management, like trying to like understand sort of how to code a particular problem as like a doctor talks to a patient. The doctor wants to help patients. They don't want to sit on a computer and like type up the conversation and click a bunch of things and let the patient wait awkwardly while they're slowly typing with two fingers. So one of the startups we invested in, they just raised a massive new round. They automate that whole thing. They just listen to the conversation between the doctor and the patient, and then they write the report and they say like, oh, this is the procedure that we should do next, or this is the test we should run next. And it just gets all automated and put in there, which helps with like reducing burnout for doctors and so on. So those are all examples that are very immediate and very obvious. That also means they're more competitive. And then there are some things that I think will happen the next maybe 5 years or so on a larger scale, which is as more and more of the digital jobs will have seen this trend to automation, you will then move to more physical jobs and, the sciences and so on, and then see automation there. Because at some point, if you're plumber or roofer or tiler or whatever makes more money than all the people working digital jobs, because there's so little automation in those jobs, and not enough people who want to do them, then there's more sort of market incentive to start helping automate some of those physical jobs too. But right now, the job of a maid in some weird way is safer than that, especially one that does a lot of things like doing laundry and so on, and like cleaning like specific houses versus just doing vacuum cleaning, which Roomba can do already to some degree. Those are safer because there's no one's collecting data on how cleaning staff like do all the different things that they do and all the dishes and all of that. And when there's no data collection, then it's harder to solve that problem with AI. And then we also look at a few other things, like generally hardware is hard is kind of a statement. So anything in the physical world is harder. It is more capital intensive. So the bar for robotics types of projects is much higher. We have invested in an AI kitchen, like a robot basically that would put together salads. And we actually built the robot. It wasn't the problem, but then just the unit economics still couldn't work out, and there was a downturn. And so in theory, I thought from first principles, we will see more food delivery. We will see more ghost kitchens where there is no storefront because everything is just delivered. And so at some point you can get to economies of scale for these ghost kitchens and for them having robotics in there. But it was just too early, and the cost already to get the first prototype and actually get it to work was so high, the startup didn't work out. And so there are a bunch of such trends that we look for, and sort of where's the low cost so you can get quickly to a potential virtuous data cycle that I mentioned earlier.
Do you see something as a particular breakthrough on the economic side that's special to AI startups, or do you think in general AI startups look the same in the economic realm? Is it mostly this virtuous data cycle that you see, or are there other things?
Yeah, in a funny way, actually, AI is trying to often like automate specific tasks and help make people more efficient. But then you actually need often data for automating the task. And then if you don't have the data, you have to spend money on the data. And then you have to integrate that new automation into some process. And it actually turns out like in some companies that we see, like there are a lot of there's a lot of hand-holding and a services component to actually getting AI to run in production. And so that can actually be less optimal than just simple standard software of the past, where you just, once you have all your if then else and your rules and the UI UX, like something like an early Instagram or something, then it just works, right? You don't need to continuously worry about the distribution changing behind you and like new things happening and having to collect training data and making sure you evaluate your AI constantly and make sure it stays up to date and accurate and all of these things. So there's some more complexity in making it work really well. And then of course there are companies that would have just been completely impossible without AI. Like U.com having a chat assistant that will go to the web, summarize hundreds of pages for you, and then in a few seconds, like write this beautiful report or solve like a hard math problem for you or physics problem, and write code for you, execute that code, run it, like collect all the information needs to then give you an accurate answer. None of that would have been possible without AI, and so or all of that would have been impossible without AI. And so that we look also for such unlocks in certain industries where you couldn't have created proteins like vastly different ones that don't occur in nature anywhere without proper protein models and large data sets to help you understand the sort of language of proteins, for example. Yeah, definitely.
Maybe to switch gears, the theme of Machines and Molecules is that the guests bring a third M word apart from machines and molecules. Have you thought of a third M word?
I guess there are a couple interesting ones. MetaMind, the mind in general, is an interesting one. MetaMind was the name of my first startup, and we named it MetaMind because we hoped to build a general purpose AI platform that can be applied to lots of different things. And while that is a beautiful idea, beautiful MetaMind, no pun intended, ultimately you have to sell. And it's much easier for one startup to focus on one particular task, sell it, dominate one niche, and then expand afterwards. And so before we really got deep into our niche, we already got acquired because that platform was just much more valuable within a company like Salesforce that had that distribution and figured out how to go sell things. But at the time didn't have AI, and that was a really nice seed that we set. And now Salesforce is much better positioned. This was many years ago, of course, and lots of other people worked on this as well. But yeah, that was my first startup, MetaMind. When your first startup, you make a lot more mistakes, and then when you do another startup afterwards, if you have that energy again, you hope you make fewer mistakes and at least not repeat the mistakes you have made in the past. And you get better at building a startup from scratch is one of the hardest things that any human can do. And so it's inevitable that you make some mistakes. But if you work in a field that is expanding very quickly and is very exciting to a lot of people, you can often get away with making more mistakes. If you're in mobile, as mobile happen, if you're cloud computing, as cloud computing happen, if you're those kinds of things, that definitely helps versus working in an industry that is slowly shrinking, like libraries.
Yeah, of course. Well, libraries are shrinking fast, I guess. So would you say that's the most important lesson learned from MetaMind, to focus?
Yeah, focus and eventually, there's sort of a trope, and it's almost banal, but if you really let it sink in, it is a useful thing to always remember as a startup founder, which is there's only a single thing that a company can do, and that's run out of money. Once you run out of money, you're dead. If you keep having money, you keep having more shots at goal, right? And so there aren't that many ways of getting money into a company. Is either you fundraise or you make revenue, right? Basically. And so you have to, as a startup CEO, one of your number one responsibilities is to, always plan, A, B, C, and put together backups of the backups to make sure that doesn't happen. And as long as that doesn't happen, then you get to, build amazing things.
Yeah, true. And then run path A, B, and C in parallel, so that if A doesn't pan out, then B is right around the corner. Yeah, definitely.
Yes and no. Yes, you need to, the backups need to be sort of real, but at the same time, you can't hedge too much. If you do a bunch of things a little bit and you don't really execute on any one of them really well, and that also doesn't work, right? So sometimes, doing 10 things in parallel is certain death. Doing one or two things in parallel has still potential for the death of the company, but at least you have a higher chance of succeeding if you're fully focused and quote unquote swing for the fences in some ways.
With your fund, AIX Ventures, you've recently raised a bigger fund. What do you think will change now as compared to, I think before AIX was about 50 million, if I read that correctly somewhere, and now it's about 200 and something. So what will change?
Yeah, we're growing. Fund 2 was a $200 million fund. And what will change is that we're going to be able to lead rounds and hire more of a full-time team. Full disclosure, I don't manage anyone at AIX. We have Sean Johnson, my co-founder, who manages all the people who are working full-time in the fund. But that team will increase and will become a more legit, proper fund that can not just put in sort of participatory checks and follow-on checks, but actually rely on leading seed rounds.
Okay. And what would you say have you learned in the VC investing space? How was that journey for you? I think it was you were one of the people who had the ideas to do this fund, and then you picked up Sean and picked all the rest of the investment partners and dragged them into the fund. How did that come about, and what did you learn on the journey?
Oh, so many lessons. But yeah, at a high level, I was doing a lot of angel investing, and I was very fortunate to have had a lot of incredible students and interns and coworkers and friends and people in my network that have gone on to do amazing things. One of the most amazing examples are two of my students who started Hugging Face. And invested at a 5 million valuation. They're worth almost 5 billion now. And so it went really well. And so I thought, well, how do I scale this up? And, I didn't want to spend more time than I already was in investing. I still want to build AI, and I think it's important. And part of why my investing worked out is that I'm staying at that very cutting edge of AI. And so I see kind of the future before it's obvious to a lot of people who spend they're full-time on just investing. And so the idea is like, well, if that gives you alpha, then I'll keep doing that. And then we'll find more amazing people. So I thought of all the smartest people in AI that I knew, Chris Manning, one of my advisors at Stanford, Peter Beal, incredible professor and expert and founder also in robotics, and Anthony Goldblum, who built Kaggle. And we basically said, hey, let's do this together. We will continue doing our jobs, staying on the forefront of AI, but also have this full-time team and a support to actually invest at a larger scale. And so kind of distributing that now, and it's working really, really well. We have a lot of very happy LPs. We have some amazing companies in the portfolio, and I'm very excited to see that grow.
So the lessons learned, would you say these are exactly the lessons, like some things stay the same even for AI, like B2B, you have to have a very strong sales team? Or is there something, is this something that you learned from investing, or would you say this is something that you learned from talking to a lot of friends that built startups?
It's definitely helpful to see other pitches, from startups pitching you as a fund, and then going out and pitch yourself. You're like, oh, this is what resonated with me when I heard it. And then just seeing where the world is going, and knowing, okay, here's some other people working on these ideas, and is definitely helpful. I do think there's a lot of synergy, and that's why all our investing partners are very engaged with the fund, and that's been really fun to see. I think one thing that doesn't change is the only way ultimately to scale your output successfully and your impact is to work with really smart people. And so similar to what I mentioned, the founding team and so on, that is true also for the fund as well as for the startups we want to invest in.
Yeah. Okay. Super. Thank you, Richard, for this enticing talk. Even though you and I are both tired due to the time difference, I think for you it's like, what is it, 10:30, and for me it's 7:30 in the morning.
We just had daylight savings, so now it's 11:30. Yeah.
11:30. Okay, my God. Yes. Thanks a lot. Looking forward to seeing you in the Valley or in Germany.
I'll come to Dresden in April. And let us know, listeners here, if you want to join them. Very honored. I'm getting an honorary doctorate and doctor in Dresden, and so I'm coming there at the end of April. So yeah, hope you can make it.
Super. Thank you, Richard.
Awesome.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.